The Arabia was a side-wheeler steamboat built in the early 1850s in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, south of Pittsburgh on the Monongahela River. Its two paddle wheels were just under 30 feet in diameter, and each was powered by its own wood-burning steam engine. It was primarily a cargo boat that could also carry passengers, and it had a shallow draft to allow navigation of wide, silty rivers, and could manage an average speed of 5 miles per hour going upstream. It was operated on the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers for a few years before new ownership had it transferred to operation on the Missouri River. In 1856, it was sold to new owners and made 14 trips up and down the Missouri River before its fateful final voyage. In September of that year, it set out on a trip upriver with tons of cargo and 130 passengers, most of them being wives and children of men who had gone ahead to homestead new settlements in the recently opened territories. The decks were loaded with many wooden barrels of whiskey, but most of the cargo consisted of textiles and tools intended to stock general stores in 16 new river settlement towns. As such, the cargo included most of the manufactured items, textiles, and luxury preserved foodstuffs needed for daily life on the frontier. Steamboats such as the Arabia burned wood to power their steam engines. They burned so much that it was impossible to carry enough for an entire trip. So the crew harvested trees from the shoreline of the river they were navigating, which resulted in shore erosion. Many remaining trees on the eroding shores would fall into the river and float downstream, a hazard to river navigation. The Missouri River was very shallow, muddy, and with a silt riverbed at least 15 to 20 feet deep under the water. A popular saying in those days was that the water in the Missouri River was too thick to drink and too thin to plow. If the root ball of a floating tree trunk stuck in the silt, the current would tip the trunk over so it pointed downstream like a submerged spear, and these were known as snags. Even snags that were fully submerged might be spotted by a careful crew during the daylight due to ripples or eddy currents forming on the surface of the water over the snags, but they remained a constant hazard and numerous riverboats were damaged or sunk after having their hulls punctured by a snag. On September 5, 1856, near the town of Parkville, Missouri, the Arabia hit a sycamore tree snag which ripped the hull open. The ship quickly sank to the top of the silt layer, and the lightweight or buoyant cargo such as whiskey barrels floated away. The 130 passengers moved to the upper deck, while the crew, fearful of an imminent boiler explosion, fled for shore on the ship's only rowboat. After it became apparent that the boilers were already submerged without exploding, they rowed back and started to carry passengers to safety. All passengers and crew escaped, except for a mule whose reins were tied to a small sawmill on the deck. The Arabia then slowly sank through the silt until its hull and cargo was completely buried, and the remaining upper structure was washed away by the river current. Early salvage operations were made, mostly to retrieve remaining whiskey, and at least one such effort involved sinking a caisson down into the silt until it reached the remains of the ship. Soon after, the river flooded, and as it was prone to do, it shifted its course, and the bend where the Arabia was buried was no longer part of the river, and after it dried out it was used for farmland. The Arabia remained in its tomb under the soil of a cornfield south of the Missouri River for well over 100 years. In 1988, a salvage group decided to locate and excavate one of the known sunken or buried old riverboats. The Arabia's location was approximately known, and it was soon located by magnetically detecting the metal of its boilers. Permission to excavate over the winter was granted by the landowner of the cornfield it was buried under, located just south of a bend in the Missouri's current channel immediately to the east of Kansas City's Nearman Creek power plant. With a deadline of completing the excavation and restoring the site before the spring planting in 1989, a series of high-capacity pumps were used to keep the giant excavated hole dry, and the salvage team successfully removed the boilers, one engine, the wooden stern, and all remaining cargo. Originally intending to sell the booty for profit, the team soon realized that what they had in their possession was in fact the largest collection of pre-Civil War artifacts in existence, and as Indiana Jones might say, "This belongs in a museum." Thus, in 1991, the 30,000 square foot Steamboat Arabia Museum was opened in Kansas City, Missouri, and a huge restoration program began that has been slowly moving artifacts from cold storage to displayable condition. While cotton textiles mostly did not survive the conditions, most of the cargo remained in excellent condition and required cleaning and sometimes chemical treatment to stabilize or prevent deterioration. Foodstuffs such as salt pork and pickles are still edible. The museum's collection of hundreds of thousands of historic artifacts include almost everything that people on the frontier would need, excepting what they would likely produce locally, such as grains, vegetables, and meats. Some of the Arabia's restored cargo includes over 1,000 leather shoes and boots, textiles, buttons, beads, buckles, dining cutlery and other silverware, china and other plates, bowls, cups, pitchers, etc., 247 leather and felt hats, 235 axe heads, hardwood axe handles, 29 jars of pickles, 328 pocket knives, carpentry tools, drill bits, saw blades and small sawmills, chains, rifles and handguns, bottles of various alcoholic beverages, hand tools, locks and keys, toys, brooches, clasps, and earrings, bottles of perfume, pots and pans, glass jars, wooden buckets, pottery jugs and other containers, oil lamps, crystal containers, and much, much more. The museum's main floor layout is outlined as a full-scale 171-foot-long hull of the ship, with the boilers and one engine in their proper position. The preserved wooden stern is nearby, although not in the proper position relative to the hull outline. It rests in a special area that can be curtained and sprayed from above with preservative chemicals, although most of that preservation has already taken place. An anchor and a full-size replica of one of the 28-foot diameter paddle wheels is connected to a drive arm mechanism, and it turns slowly in a shallow water basin. One of the restoration laboratories is visible to allow visitors to view the treatment of artifacts that are being transitioned from cold storage to display status. The rest of the periphery of the hull area consists of many display galleries, with the restored artifacts visible for inspection by visitors. The Steamboat Arabia Museum, also confusingly called the Arabia Steamboat Museum or the Treasures of the Steamboat Arabia Museum, has a website called 1856.com. Try guessing that one. The museum is still owned by the families of the Salvage group, and the family members are usually around to greet visitors and talk with them. The museum charges about $15 per adult, with discounts for children and seniors. There is a gift shop and food available upstairs from the main museum. The museum itself is the centerpiece of a sort of galleria, with various stores and restaurants to either side. The typical visitor will take a 20-minute tour, which is really just an introductory history lesson about the Arabia, its cargo, the sinking, and the salvage. This is followed by a 13-minute movie in a small theater, showing some of the excavation and salvage. After this, visitors can take their time to view any part of the museum at their own pace, and repeat visitors or visitors in a hurry can bypass the tour and/or the movie and get right to the museum floor. Visitors should allow a minimum of 2 hours for a visit. Following is a short video sequence taken during my most recent visit on March 1st, 2018.
And something to preserve it and make sure that it didn't fall apart because it was all water. And waterlogged means the cellulose inside the cells, inside the wood, which are like fiber, like cotton, was gone, all dissolved from the water. So if you soak it in something called PEG, polyethylene glycol, it's the thing that makes shampoos and deodorants glide, you can actually drink it over water. So starting at the top of the boat, the smokestacks were gone, the pilot house with the wheel, the crew quarters, the restaurant, the quarters for the guests, all gone. That's just the main thing of the boat. You can see that the paddle wheels are busted up. So that's what you're looking at there. Now, what have they done? You're going to meet
I think the lights are supposed to be coming on in here, maybe not. Lots of shoes and boots. Doorknobs, casters, locks, striker plates, chains, draw bolts, keys. These are some of the original boilers. And that's where the Arabia was found. This is one of the hubs for the paddle wheel. And this is the bow of the Arabia. Most of the woodwork was not salvaged, but this part was.
So do you know what they use Byzantine for?